With gas prices on the rise and items becoming even more and more expensive for the average American consumer, the US war with Iran has increasingly become a contentious topic within the American public. Today, we will go over the history of US-Iran relations, especially leading up to this war, and also some major details in this war that are important in predicting what may happen in the future. Iran has historically been strategically targeted by the United States and many other Western countries. In 1951, Iran decided to nationalize their oil assets and make a bunch of progressive reforms under Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh. This greatly alarmed Britain because they had a lot of shares and assets in Iran, specifically through the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. Britain tried to overthrow Mossadegh through many measures, but every single one failed, so they looked towards to their greatest ally, the United States. And with help with the Shah, the United States successfully enacted a coup against Mossadegh and overthrew him. Unfortunately, the Shah would end up going back into power and ended up creating a repressive regime. After this conflict, the US ended up with 40% of Iranian oil shares, and Iran ended up with an oppressive government and, again, loss of economic autonomy. Despite US government involvement negatively impacting Iran, the US and Iran actually had some pretty cordial relations with each other. In 1957, the US and Iran signed the 1957 Civil Nuclear Cooperation Agreement, in which the US would give Iran some nuclear apparatus and some US-trained Iranian nuclear scientists, in return for Iran being a buffer state between the Soviet Union and the US. To help oversee this agreement, the International Atomic Energy Agency, also known as the IAEA, would regularly visit Iranian technology sites. Iran would later sign the Non-Proliferation Treaty of 1968, in which they were labeled as a state that could not develop nuclear weapons, but could have nuclear technology. All of these early developments in nuclear agreements between the US and Iran helped set the stage for current nuclear relations with Iran. Unfortunately, this cordial relationship would end in 1979 with the Iranian Revolution, in which a religious autocratic regime was put into place in Iran, also known as the Islamic Iran Republic, or Islamic Republic of Iran. This revolution happened in response to public frustration with Western imperialism and distrust with the monarchy in Iran. It would end up with Iran cutting ties with many Western countries. Later, it would also set the stage for the Iran hostage crisis, in which revolutionaries took 52 to 66 Americans hostage in an embassy in Tehran for 444 days. Following that was the Iran-Contra affair, and Reagan would later label Iran as a terrorist state. Later on, the US would place massive sanctions on Iran. President after president would accuse Iran of being a terrorist state or funding terrorist organizations, and both states would end up funding opposing militias all around the world. It became apparent that the US's relations with Iran had soured. But despite these bitter relations, in 2013, under President Obama, US and Iran signed a nuclear agreement. This agreement would slow Iranian nuclear development in exchange for lifted sanctions. And overlooking this was again the IAEA. According to the IAEA, it was pretty successful. Or at least that was until 2018, when Donald Trump came into the office and withdrew the US from this agreement. He argued that the US didn't benefit enough from this nuclear agreement. In May of 2025, Trump had sent Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei a letter and a 60-day ultimatum demanding a ceasement of uranium enrichment and also potential nuclear weaponry development in Iran. According to Trump and his administration, they were pretty optimistic with a potential peaceful agreement with Iran, or at least that was until June 13th. That day, Israel constructed airstrikes all throughout Iran, and Donald Trump, in support of this, had demanded Iran's unconditional surrender. On top of his demands, he also conducted airstrikes in Iran, specifically in 3 major nuclear development sites. According to many security experts, like that from the Center of Strategic and International Studies, the US's choice to conduct airstrikes in Iran was imperative, but somewhat coerced. Israel had damaged Iranian air defenses, putting Iran in a vulnerable position only for the US to strike. Some experts argue that Israel made this move to push the US into a corner of attacking their enemy and also inhibiting any possible peaceful agreement with Iran. For example, when the US made a nuclear agreement with Iran in 2013, the Prime Minister of Israel at that time, Netanyahu, had proclaimed the agreement to be a historic mistake. Many critics argue that Israel does not want the US and Iran to have a peaceful. Some critics believe that Israel does not want the US to have a peaceful nuclear agreement with Iran, because that would obscure Israel's abilities to attack. Talks of nuclear agreements would resume in February 2026, but surprisingly, on February 28th, the US would drop even more airstrikes on Iranian nuclear sites, and they would also start to target militias in Iran, such as the IRGC's headquarters and the besieged facilities. This would lead to the assassination of Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and the promotion of his son Mojtaba Khamenei as Supreme Leader. And then later on March 10th of 2026, the US would enact what Secretary of War Hegseth calls the most intense days of strikes. He would state in a press conference at the Pentagon that the US's aims were to permanently deny Iran's ability to create or have nuclear weapons, that they would destroy Iran's navy and also destroy missile stockpiles and bases. But the US did not just target military bases. They also targeted civilian facilities, such as an all-girls elementary school. The most interesting part about this is that it all happened because the US accused Iran of trying to create nuclear weapons. And although the IAEA did report that Iran had massive stockpiles of uranium, which is an important substance in the creation of nuclear weapons, that did not inherently mean that Iran was creating nuclear weapons. According to IAEA Director Grossi, he stated that there was no concrete evidence that Iran had started to develop nuclear weapons. So this prompts the question, what was the point of this conflict? And also, what about Iran? What is Iran going to do now that their economy is in shambles, their infrastructure is damaged, and that they had just lost their supreme leader of their political regime? What is Iran going to do now, and what are they doing now? Well, in a recent public statement by Mojtaba Khamenei, the new supreme leader, he stated that he would use the enclosement of the Strait of Hormuz as leverage against his enemies. The Strait of Hormuz is the most important oil passageway in the world. Its enclosement would leave the US and the world dry of major oil and gas. It would also make prices for oil increase to more than $100 per barrel. American officials are also very much aware of this impact on the United States. President Donald Trump recently tweeted in his Truth Social channel this: Tuesday will be Power Plant Day and Bridge Day, all wrapped up in one, in Iran. There will be nothing like it. Open the fucking strait, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell. Just watch. Praise be to Allah. This quite vulgar and offensive tweet showcases the lack of decorum the US has in regards to this conflict, and also how heated this enclosement has made US officials. And on top of these expenses in oil, this conflict is costing the United States $891.4 million a day. This war is costing the US so much, and although the US is favored to win, Iran is not alone in this conflict. Through Russia's shadow fleet and plenty of unconstrained crude oil, Russia has already made more than $6 billion from this war. And China has also demanded US ceasefire in Iran. From Russia to Israel to even China, this war seems to not just be a quarrel between two states. It is an intense international conflict that's roots span from decades ago.